person you're dating is a direct reflection of how much self-worth you have.
You should be picky.
Anybody that's manipulative, run. You're so pure. Run, 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 run.
When you're dating at a really, really young age, you really don't know yourself.
From 25 to 30, I'm an entirely different person.
Don't settle.
Live up to your standards.
People are who they are.
Yes,
and
believe them. You only have so long to be single.
No one will want to be with him simply because he wasn't their vibe.
You can fix bad outfits. If you are not happy and whole on yourself, nobody else can fill that for you. Welcome back to the Couples Edition with Allie and Ely. This is a podcast where we share our perspective on intentional dating, navigating marriage as two people from different races and cultures, and the behind the scenes of taking big risks to live an adventurous life.
And today we will be talking about some of the biggest mistakes that we've made, some of the things that we've avoided, we've learned, and how you can avoid some of the same mistakes in your dating journey. And so kicking off, why don't we set the stage on kind of our history here? When did you first get into your most serious relationship? Maybe not most serious, but into your first serious relationship?
I think my first longer intentional relationship maybe was at 15. And one thing I took away from that relationship is the person you're dating is a direct reflection of how much self-worth you have. That was a terrible relationship. He treated me terribly. And I look back now on the person I was then and everything I didn't know or understand.
Yeah.
And how much I wish I could tell myself. Which is why we're doing this episode.
Yeah, exactly. If you could give your 15-year-old self relationship advice, what would it be?
Ooh, girl, you deserve so much more. I look back at who I was then, and I think this is really important in dating. That in my opinion, like young relationships just aren't that serious. Like obviously you don't know who you are yet. You don't know what you want in life.
Yeah.
So you can't really take it that seriously in my opinion. It's more just for fun. But with that said, I had no idea my self-worth. And I think a lot of that comes from home and your upbringing with parents, and especially for girls, your relationship with your dad.
Absolutely.
Daddy issues, like that's a whole other thing for another episode maybe. But I just look back at who I was and the things that I put up with that I had no idea how much more I deserved.
Wow.
And I look back at that girl now and I just wish I could tell her like, honey, you deserve so much more. This dude is not worth your time.
Yeah, I feel like I could definitely resonate a bit with that. And I think that like when you're dating at a really, really young age, you really don't know yourself. And I think if you are a young individual and you are dating, trying to almost like look into the future at like who you might be, who you want to be, and date for that person in a way.
Yeah.
And maybe that will give you, probably some higher standards because you can kind of see who you want to be and who you want to become and who that person needs.
It's so hard though, because especially in high school, which is when I think most people really start dating, is you're in such a bubble. You're not thinking about life in the big picture. And that's why I think it's so tragic and sad when people commit suicide or have terrible outcomes in high school because you just can't see the future at that point. You're in such a bubble of school dances and do you have a date for prom and what friend group are you in? It's so hard to see beyond that. So I think for me, it really was more about learning to love myself and even thinking more internally about the person I wanted to be.
Absolutely.
Even if you couldn't see long term, who do you want to be in high school in this season? What do you want to be known and remembered for?
Exactly.
And living that way, and then also applying that to dating. Yeah. Because I look back at the losers I dated and I'm like, that is not what I want to be known for or what I would do now. And it's sad, but sometimes I also do think you have to learn and grow from those experiences. So I don't regret it per se. Yeah. I definitely learned a lot and it shaped a lot about who I became.
Yeah, that's fair. My first serious relationship was when I was 21.
Was that in college or right
after? In college. Yeah, in college. And I think a big takeaway that I had, if I could go back, I think I would tell myself that people rarely change. I feel like when you are 21, you are developing, therefore you're kind of hoping that everyone else is also developing. Yeah. But there are some people that have specific traits that just won't ever change because they have developed those traits into their second nature. So I would go back and tell myself that look out for the things that you don't really see changing and know that they won't change about that person.
Yeah, and also you can't change people. I think it's so easy, especially when you're younger, to believe like, oh, I can change them or I can get them to believe to see things differently. You really can't. It really is a personal choice on somebody and their own heart posture to want to change or learn and grow. You really can't take on a project and make them mold them into what you want.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think that people oftentimes have this belief that like they can change and mold people because you're in love, because you're doing life together, and you are becoming grown adults together, that you'll somehow mold and change to be better for each other in the future. And that's possible. I'm sure that people have experienced that. I also believe that people rarely change. And as you are developing, you are creating your own mindsets, your own ways of seeing life, your own ways of seeing the future. And I totally believe that there are specific things about a person that just will never change. And you have to find those things that don't align with you and recognize that that's what you're buying into, or you should probably walk away.
Isn't it crazy at that age, though? I think back to even my early 20s. At that age, it feels like you know everything. It feels like you're so grown and you've lived so much life that you're, for me at least, I felt like...
I didn't feel that way.
Really?
Yeah.
I felt like, wow, I'm finally like grown. I know what I'm doing to an extent. I wasn't like arrogant about it, but I did feel like as compared to high school, like, wow, we're grown up now. We know what we want. And then I think even just 5 years later, from 20 to 25, I was an entirely different person. And then from 25 to 30, I'm an entirely different person. And it's just crazy that the more you age and learn and experience life, you change, which is why I think young relationships are really hard too, because it's hard to find somebody that will grow with you as you guys are figuring out who you want to be and what you want in life. I think that's just a really tough age to nail that down.
Whenever I was about 21, 22, I pretty much only knew where I wanted to go and where I wanted to be. And for me, I knew the things that were stopping me and getting in my way. So I was able to kind of sift through some of those things. And when it came to dating, me, it was like recognizing that someone was like smart, intelligent as either I was or more. By that, I mean like street smart, book smart. I think those were like fundamental things I think in life, because street smart is like, I think, emotional intelligence, knowing how to behave at a grocery store, knowing how to deal with the clerk. You don't teach those things in class, right? So I think those things are things that you can kind of figure out from someone if they know how to do these things and know how to, to carry themselves in public. And then there's book smart, which is just like understanding how the world works in a way, understanding the important things about your career, important things about money, and important things about jobs. Some of those, like, I think like harder asset things. And so for me, I at least knew that, okay, these two buckets are really important. And so when it comes to dating, I want to find someone that understands these two buckets. So going back, I think something that I would also tell myself is to not waste time on individuals that were overly indexed on one and not the other, or didn't have either at all. And I think that I quickly learned that, wow, those things are really important and they might be hard to sift out for some others.
Yeah, I'm definitely a big believer in the not wasting time thing. Looking back to that time period, what's one piece of dating advice that you wish people would stop giving?
I wish people would stop telling people to not be picky. You should be picky. At a very young age, people are often telling you to like explore, experiment. And I think that definitely encourages this mindset of like, don't be picky, just try things and see how they work out. I think you should absolutely be picky. I think picking who you spend the most time with is just as important as picking your career or picking, jobs, figuring out college, because those individuals you spend the most time with will influence how you think about
1000%,
life, college, school. So for me, it was always identifying like, how do I make sure that I am putting myself around the best people, not just friends, but opposite sex individuals
like
as well.
Dating interests. Yeah, I was going to say the opposite because I thought you were just talking about dating, but like your friends too, the people you surround yourself with have a direct impact on who you become, the way you think about life, etc. But I think to build off what you're saying about be picky, live up to your standards, because I think a lot of people, especially when you're younger, or even now, a lot of people who do have high standards don't live up to them. Like I've heard people say, oh, I need my person to be fit, they need to be in the gym, and you're like,
You have to be
Are you
fit
in the gym?
in
Are
the
you
gym.
fit?
Yeah.
So if you're going to be picky, you should be picky about yourself as well and make sure that you're living up to the expectations that you have for other people.
Exactly. Yeah, it's funny that big show on Netflix, Pop the Balloon. Yeah. There's a ton of people that, will pop the balloon for individuals, and then they want something that is far above their standard.
Yeah.
And when you learn about that individual, they're not even at that standard, which is really, really interesting. So yeah, I definitely think that like if you're going to be picky, you have to also be able to live by that standard.
Yeah.
So it makes sense.
1,000%. I hate that show because it's so similar to dating apps in that you're judging somebody based off their first impression physically.
Yeah.
And I think that's so backwards. And I think that's something I would also tell my younger self, because I was somebody that always wanted to date like the bad boy, the cool guy, whatever.
Yeah.
There were so many nice guys that probably would have been fabulous boyfriends.
Yeah.
And I was just not interested in them at all.
Yeah.
Maybe because they weren't as cute, they weren't as athletic, whatever.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that is so misguided.
Yeah.
I think with dating apps, you see somebody's photo and you make a snap judgment. I have a past boyfriend that I got introduced to.
Yeah.
And before I met him in person, I saw a photo of him and
Yeah.
I was like, there's no way I'm going to be into this guy.
Yeah.
He's not my type. He's not cute.
Yeah.
And then we met and hit it off because his personality was so attractive.
Yeah.
People need to be careful not to write people off just based off first physical appearance.
Yeah.
Just based off first physical appearance.
Yeah.
Because like that show on Netflix, when they pop the balloon, then when the person starts talking, sometimes they're like, oh, can I get a new balloon? And it's like, well, you shouldn't have been so picky with what they look like.
Yeah.
Before you find out like, oh, they're really successful and they're a great person. And then you're like, oh.
Yeah.
Maybe. Okay.
I know, it's crazy. There's actually a guy that is going viral right now. He's like a doctor, super successful. Most of the girls found him attractive, and they all just like popped their balloons. No one wanted to be with him simply because he wasn't their vibe. And I get it. Like, the vibe checks are real. I totally get it. Apparently, he's a pretty attractive guy. Like most women on the group suggested he was. And they all straight out just like popped the balloons. And, pretty sad. But
maybe because he had a bad outfit on, which...
that was something that someone called out.
Let me just say something. You can fix bad outfits. When I met this one...
I was always fly.
His fashion was questionable at best.
My fashion was always legit.
And he has come a very long way.
It did get better, though.
And I just think if you're so petty about things like that are fixable, I think when it comes to character flaws, that's completely different.
Sure.
Somebody has to actually work on themselves to change a character flaw.
Yeah.
You can always buy your man new clothes.
You can always go shopping for new clothes.
You can always rejig that.
You can't go shopping for new character.
Exactly. So we've shared some background to a little bit of our dating history and things we wish we knew. What were some red flags that you didn't know to look out for back then?
I think some really big red flags were being comfortable and being complacent that I just didn't know about.
Yeah.
And the reason why is because when you get to college, you kind of feel like we're all on this upward trajectory, right? Because you're like, we're all going to graduate, we're all going to get great jobs, we're all going to be successful, and that's amazing. So like, if you're on this campus, you're going somewhere. That's amazing. And I think something that I realized is some people were just comfortable being there and getting out, and that was enough. Like for them, life starts at graduation. For me, I feel like I wanted a partner that was continuously growing exponentially every, however so often, and wanting a challenge in life, wanting to experiment more, wanting to feel more, to change, to grow. And so a big red flag for me that I'm now realizing that, if I went back, I would try to look out for those things were being comfortable and complacent.
So it sounds like at that point you started to figure out a little bit of what you wanted and what was important to you from a broader life perspective.
Yeah.
Of like knowing the direction of where somebody was going and how motivated they were.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think another thing that I think about is avoiding little thinkers. And I think what that means for me is people that think small in many aspects of their life. People that only see the world through, and I think that's just a really bad way to live. And when you date people like that, you start to carry some of those characteristics as well.
Yeah.
And the world is so big. There are so many people in this world, so many cultures, religions, different ways of thinking about careers and family building and all these different aspects of life. And I think when you spend too much time with little thinkers, you really start to feel that you are being, I would say, put in a box.
Yeah.
And that to me was a really big red flag, is not being stuck in a box because my partner thought too small.
Your red flags are so cute and like character building.
Why? What are some of yours?
My red flags are all toxic. Like,
really?
Anybody that is forcing you to be physical and you don't want to be, run. Anybody that's manipulative, run. Yours are all like, oh, you know, they're nice, but they're just not motivated enough. And mine are like, toxic.
Wow.
Toxic.
What are yours?
A big one is, I think a lot of girls find themselves in positions where guys are pressuring them to be more physical than they want to be.
Physical, like how? Sexually or in the gym?
Physical.
Oh, I thought this whole time I thought you meant like going to the gym.
You're so cute.
Well, you did say
pure.
gym. I am pure.
You're so pure. No, like toxic. They want to be sexually physical with you, and you have either stated boundaries you don't want to, or you know, you're not showing interest, and you keep pushing back.
Yeah.
And they start manipulating you, or you know, being mad or playing games with you, trying to get you to do what they want. Run, 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 run. Not only have I experienced that, but I've seen it in friend stories and people I've talked to and just on the internet.
Okay.
Those stories I just think are so toxic. And I think sometimes, especially when you have daddy issues, you want male attention. And sometimes it's like, well, they'll like me more if I do this. And it's like, no, girl. If they're pressuring you, they do not respect you, they do not like you, run. Yeah. So that's a big one. And then another one in a similar vein is manipulation.
Okay.
Toxic people can be so manipulative where they start treating you badly if you're not acting or behaving the way they want you to, where they will make you feel bad. And so you start to pick up these cues like, oh, when I do this, they get upset, so I should stop doing that.
Absolutely.
That is manipulation.
Yes.
Run.
Yeah.
Things like that for me, I just didn't have any conceptual awareness to understand that it was happening. Even in friendships, I remember I had a guy friend, it was platonic. Yeah. And he was so manipulative. And I had no idea until like we stopped being friends. And maybe a year or two later, looking back, starting to understand more what manipulation looked like. I was like, I had no idea. He was such a bad friend. Why did I put up with that? And I think that happens in dating too. And things like that to me are such big red flags that I just did not know about. And so my advice to people now is run. It is not worth it. Anybody that makes you do anything you don't want to do does not like you. They are not your friend.
I think another one is having partners who like your life is literally at the center of everything they do. Meaning, like, they don't have anything else to do but go to your game, visit your job, or if you work at retail, hopefully they're not coming to your corporate job. You know, like, they only hang out with your family. They only hang out with your friends. They never leave their hermits until you have things to do. I think that is definitely a trait that is pretty toxic, and it is, I think, a red flag for me. You start to lose that sense of individualism to be able to live your separate life, have your separate social connections with other people, and your life starts to become their entire life.
Yeah, that's really scary because then it feels hard to get out too.
Exactly.
Especially if all your friends are merged. I think it's so important at any stage of life, whether dating or married, to have your own friends.
Yeah.
If everything is merged and you guys break up, that's really rough, especially if people have to start picking sides, you get left alone. Like, don't make their friends your friends.
Exactly.
Make sure you build your own friends.
And they start to become like helicopter boyfriends or girlfriends.
Yeah.
But they're always like with your friends.
They always want to hang out with you.
They're always
and you
there.
Can't have like girls' night or boys' night.
I know.
You hear those stories on TikTok. I'm like, no, thank you.
I know. Let's talk about some of the folks who might be going through a tough time. What is your advice to someone that might be going through heartbreak right now?
Heartbreak is so rough.
It is.
I've only experienced it when I've been broken up with or cheated on. Thankfully, those of each only happened once that I'm aware of. Yeah. And I will say, the lesson I've learned is that time heals those wounds. Yeah. The one time that I was dumped, it took me a few months to look back on the relationship and actually be grateful that it had ended. Yeah. Because when you're so close in something in a relationship, you can't see oftentimes some red flags, which we've talked about in prior episodes. Like, that's why it's important to bring this person around your friends and your family. Yeah. So you can have outside opinions. Yeah. and verification in a way, because after they broke up with me, I think it was around like maybe 6 months later, it was not right away, I started to look back at our relationship and I started to see things now that the emotions were gone. I started to see things that like, whoa, I didn't like that, or whoa, that was manipulative, or wow, I'm glad it didn't work out. That's actually not what I want. And it ended up being a great learning experience. But I think it's so easy in heartbreak. You're so full of emotion that you want that person back. And I would say give yourself time and set a boundary. Like something I did when I got dumped was I set a date on the calendar. It was like a month or two away. And I was like, okay, I'm going to give myself time to like grieve, be sad about it. And then when this date comes, we're going to reassess and move on. And I thought that was really helpful because it kind of took the pressure off as well. But it also gave me an end date to, okay, by this point, we're going to take a retrospective, look back, analyze what we liked, what we didn't, and then we're going to move on. And kind of what we've talked about previously about our lists. I think anytime something ends, you can use it as a learning experience. What could you have done better? What could they have done better? What do you want in the next person? And move on. But I would say definitely never try to go back to the person. If somebody broke up with you and broke your heart, it probably was not the right fit. Of course, there's some examples where like things come back around and it makes sense. But that's probably more the exception than the rule. And so I would say like in those scenarios when you're heartbroken, give yourself time to grieve and then do a retrospective on all the things you didn't like about that person and add that to your list of what you want in the next person, the opposite, like the positives about those things.
How long is enough time to grieve?
I think it's different for every person. And I think it depends on how long you're dating. I think like at most a couple months.
I think that you should write down what you need to be able to get through this heartbreak. Write down therapy, socializing with friends, eating, exercising, setting some goals. I think you should write those things down and then actually do them. And ideally, my opinion is you should set like 21 days max to get over a breakup. Like don't, in my opinion, you should not give someone else more than a month to get over their broken heart.
True.
You only get 12 in a year. So you don't want to give one away to someone that broke your heart or, you know, maybe something tragic happened. I totally get it if it's a different scenario, like someone died or something terrible happened to them. But I mean, if someone like straight out broke your heart, I think you should give yourself, 7 to 14 days. And then the rest, you just got to get through it and set a date, like you said. And you got to be like, all right, I'm over it. I'm getting past this. I'm learning from this and I'm moving on. Life is so big. There's so much to do and so much to experience. And I don't think that you should dwell in painful moments. I think they'll just build on.
Yeah, I don't even think it's about dwelling in painful moments. I think it's hard when you lose somebody that was like your best friend. Maybe you talked and were texting all day or you hung out almost every day. I think that's the hardest part. And when I talk about grieving, what I think about is because you kind of have to start life over in terms of your routine for that season to rewrite it without that person. And I think that's the hard part to get over in some ways, which is why I like your idea of like making a list of what do you need to do to blossom into a new person in this season and set new goals and create new dreams. And obviously not on a big scale. I'm talking about just in that season.
For sure.
Like maybe you want to join a new workout class or, just start finding fun new things to do.
Yeah, exactly. And write down the things that maybe you did together, cry about them, but find ways to replace them with other things.
And also unfollow them on everything. Stop checking in on their life. Are they dating somebody else? Like that never is helpful. Just unfollow.
What about the folks that are really excited to get married, that are ready to jump into it? They are ready. What do you tell these folks?
Oh, I feel like we know so many people like that. And we have been like that. But then we also hear friends like, oh, I just want to find my one. Like maybe they're not in San Francisco, whatever.
Yeah.
It's such a tough place to be in because I think especially when people are ready to get married or want to find the one and feel like it's the right time, but they haven't found the person.
Yeah.
It is really, really tough. But I think something that I think about in retrospect, because I definitely was that person at different times and seasons where I longed for a husband. I had to learn to really embrace my singleness. Yeah. And I had to learn that you're going to be married for the rest of your life once you meet this person. You only have so long to be single. Yeah. And I think you need to do a complete reframe and flip and actually have so much gratitude and respect for your single season because you will never be that unattached and that independent again. And I'm so grateful, actually, as much as sometimes I wish we met each other sooner. I am so grateful for all the experiences I had single, like getting to move to China by myself, solo traveling Asia. I just think about all the things I did single, skydiving, bungee jumping. Like I checked off some huge bucket list items before I ever met you. And what was so cool, because something that would hold me back is like, oh, well, I would want to do this with my husband. I don't want to do it without him. I ended up doing those things without you. And then I brought you back, like when we went to Asia. I took you to some of my favorite places. And it was so fun to get to relive it with you. So I really think it's the best of both worlds, where you can go live this full, vibrant life as a single person and not wait for somebody to do it with. Go do it by yourself. Go do it with a friend. But I really emphasize, go do it by yourself. And then you get to bring your person in the future. Like you don't have to just do it once. You don't have to wait. Go live your best life. And I truly believe that when you're living your best life and you're living the life you want to live, you're creating more opportunities to meet the person that also wants to do those things. I think if you're just waiting and in isolation, like this, just waiting, I haven't found my person, I can't start life yet. I think that is such a bad approach. And I think people are really missing out if they don't get out there and start living life, even if they haven't met their person yet.
I agree. And for the people that are super eager to get married, I think some of them might be settling. And I would say if you think or feel like you are settling, my advice to you is don't settle. And do not just park the car because you are tired of driving. The journey is so much more gorgeous when you find the right places to drive by. And I feel like people sometimes will just settle because they've been dating for a while. This person is all they know. They don't want to explore more. And I totally get it. Dating can be exhausting. But if you're going to settle, your entire life, I think, is going to potentially be settled in many ways. You might be settling on the types of things that you do, settling on where you could be with your partner financially, or the kind of family you could build. All your dreams, I think, could be compromised if you settle. So my advice would be, if you're super eager to get married, don't settle. Like, make sure this individual is the best you could ever get, or else you're really probably settling with everything else that comes with that individual.
And I think going back to one of our prior episodes, that's why it's so important to have a list, because if you are eager to get married, you might be more likely to fall prey to settling if you don't have a hard list of things that you want and expect. Because I've heard people say, especially when you start getting into your 30s and you're still single, people start to feel like, well, maybe I should settle, or maybe I'm aiming too high. And it's like, why do we have this expectation that we're supposed to be married at 27, kids by 30? Like, I definitely had that when I was younger. My younger self thought I was going to get married at 25 and have kids by 30. And in retrospect, I'm so glad that didn't happen. But I think there's so much societal pressure that, like, if you're 30 or 35 and you're not married yet, that, like, you failed or you've missed it. We're all on our own paths and our own trails in life. Some people aren't supposed to be married at that age. Some people are supposed to have these experiences, develop your character, and go live your life before it's the time to meet your partner. Like, I felt like you and I met at the perfect time for what we've been called to in life, for us to kickstart that road together. But we had so much learning and development we did before each other, and it just felt like the perfect timing for when it came together. And that looks different for everybody based on our life trajectories and what we've been called to. Like, totally, you're not a failure if you're still single at 35 or 40. I know somebody that was single the majority of their life. And I think they got married in their early 40s. I forget how old. I think it was early 40s. And they met the love of their life, and they are so happily married now. And I just think, man, like, imagine if she had settled because she thought, like, I've missed the mark. I better lower my expectations. She would have never met this man.
No way.
And they have another 50, 60 years of life to enjoy. And it's like, man, settling, I really think, robs you of the joy in life.
I totally agree.
So every week we have a section called Deep Dive Tea Time, where we ask potentially controversial, juicy questions. So on today's topic, the question is, what is the worst relationship mistake you've made?
I think the biggest one I've made is being too patient. I think.
Really?
Yeah, I think people.
Your answers are all so pure.
You know, I'm such a pure, nice, kind guy. And I think people oftentimes like to preach this ideology around be patient, wait, they'll turn around, they'll change, you know. And I think, like, being too patient has hurt me, because you're kind of hoping that someone will come around the corner and change, and they'll finally get there, and they'll finally see things how you see things, or they'll be a different person. I think that's definitely been a big mistake that I have made, is just like waiting for people to change. And then I realized that like people are who they are.
Yes, and believe them.
Believe them. And it's pretty rare that people change. And so my advice to people as far as being patient is, when you see things that are, I would say, obvious character flaws, I think those are like that's probably just who they are. And it's hard to even like call them a flaw, because it just could be their personality. So recognizing that, hey, this is just someone's personality, and it will take work for 20, 30 years to undo that.
Yeah.
So if that's what you want to do.
If they even want to undo it.
Exactly. If that's what you want to do, then be in it for a ride. Otherwise, be okay with walking away, because you don't want to wake up one day and be like, wow, I thought we would have gotten past this. Ooh. And we're still dealing with it.
Yeah. But to be clear, you mean don't be patient when dating somebody, because we just talked about being patient waiting and not be too eager to be married.
Yeah. Don't be patient when you see these things, right?
Yeah.
Don't wait. I think that would be my first big mistake. And my second big mistake is very similar, but it's just around this idea of like wasting time and kind of like waiting for an alternative. And you're dating someone and you're like, okay, they're nice, but they have all these other issues. I don't really have an alternative, but this is like a good situation, not a great situation, a good situation. And I think like wasting that time can be pretty hurtful for yourself, because you're investing more and more time into a relationship when I think you should be backing out and walking away. Instead, we continue to invest and hope that things will change over time. And you're just wasting time. Yeah.
And what's so scary about that is you might miss the person that you're supposed to be with because you can't break it off with the person that you know isn't a good fit.
Exactly.
And then you might miss out on the person that was for you.
And you're just missing time like with yourself, honestly. Like being single and having just like clear space to do your own thing is probably a lot better than being with someone that you wish was someone else.
Yeah, I completely agree. My answer is definitely a lot more toxic than yours.
Yeah, what is it?
My biggest dating mistake was staying with somebody after they cheated on me.
Wow.
Which, as I mentioned earlier, I think is a direct reflection of your self-worth.
Yeah.
I guess I didn't know at the time that I deserved way better than that.
Yeah.
But I stayed with them, and then sure enough, we ended up dating for like a year and a half. And I think they had cheated on me after only like 5-6 months. And I was devastated. And then they apologized and were on their knees and like, kissed my feet metaphorically for a few months, to like make it up to me and think they had changed. And I was so stupid, fell for it. Come to find out like a year later after dating, which also wasn't a phenomenal experience. It wasn't. I find out later that not only had they cheated on me repeatedly, but they had like a side relationship with a younger girl. Yeah. At the time, I was devastated. I was angry and broke it off immediately and used a lot of cuss words and mean things that I probably wouldn't say now. Yeah. But something I learned from that is I hated the girl that I knew that he was having another relationship with. And in retrospect, I look back and I feel so bad for her. Wow. I feel so bad for her and for me because neither of us knew we deserved better. Yeah. She knew about me and she thought that I was like a cover. Wow. And that she was the real love. And I look back and I hated her so much, and I was pretty mean to her after that, which is one of my life's biggest regrets. Wow. Because I didn't know better. Yeah. I didn't know what I was worth. She didn't know what she was worth. Yeah. And I just think it's so sad that we both put up with that. Absolutely. And didn't know better. And that guy ended up being a very big loser in life and in other things, which also very sad. In retrospect, I'm not angry at him. Yeah. I feel so sad. I think it's not embarrassing, in my opinion, to be cheated on. Yeah. It makes me feel sad for the person that did the cheating because they have deep internal wounds and things about themselves, their own insecurities that cause them to do that. Yeah. And I think there's so much shame on the person that is cheated on. But the reality is that the people that do the cheating have deep internal issues, and you should run. Yeah. Anybody that cheats on you that, comes back and says they'll never do it again, whatever, it's just not true. No way. They need a lot of therapy. They need a lot of healing. Yep. And I just had no idea at the time. And I would tell anybody younger or at any age of life, don't put up with that.
No
you deserve so much better.
Way better.
Nobody deserves that. Yeah. And so that's definitely the biggest mistake I made.
Hey.
Way more toxic than your, be patient.
Well, hey, it's all different experiences, different lives.
Yeah, and it got us to where we are. And I look back at my lived experiences and I'm like, man, I learned so much for them. I am such a better, stronger, more mature person because of what I've been through and what I've learned from. Yeah. And I'm grateful for it. So I wouldn't necessarily take it back, but have I learned.
Yeah, and I've benefited from it as well.
Yeah, and I think a lot of our past relationships, like you and I are just such intentional people and we're so picky about so many things now. Yeah. And I think a lot of that is from things we've experienced that like now we know what we want. We know who we are. We know our worth. And for me, it took walking through some of those things, getting healing, finding myself to know what I want, which is I think another thing of advice for people is find yourself first. Learn to love yourself and be whole and content with who you are, what you want in life, your goals, your vision.
I agree.
Before settling down with somebody or getting serious with somebody, because no other person will ever complete you. If you are not happy and whole on yourself, nobody else can fill that for you. You have to first do the work, get therapy, whatever, to really figure out who you are, what you want, and what you deserve, because no person can complete you.
Yeah, that's a lot of really great advice, and I hope that was helpful for some people out there. But that wraps up for today, and next week we'll be talking about some of our experiences working in tech and working in corporate, and some of the highs and lows, some of the secrets, some of the
juicy stories.
Yeah, exactly. We'll cover some of our experiences in our careers and things that other people can take away from. Yeah,
I think there's a lot of juicy things to share from our career, bad bosses or discrimination, whether it's race or gender, being in dominantly male dominated fields, all that. There's so much to cover and talk about and dive into. So make sure you like, subscribe, and come back next week to hear all about that. Thanks for watching. Make sure to DM us any questions you have or future topics you want to cover.
Bye.
That's a wrap.